Both Han Li and Zi Ling reacted upon seeing each other again. This #1 beauty of the chaotic star sea almost became the concubine of a nascent soul cultivator, and Han Li, to redeem his freedom, showed no mercy, confronting Hu Laomo head-on in the late nascent soul stage without flinching. Ever since Han Li displayed extraordinary nascent soul abilities, Song Jili treated him as a nascent soul cultivator, explaining the lesson of not interfering in mortal affairs. He and Hu Laomo brought Han Li to Hu Laomo's banquet. When it came time for the toasting ceremony, Hu Laomo summoned 3 new concubines, and Zi Ling was one of them. When Zi Ling's gaze fell on Han Li, her delicate body trembled, and her usually wooden eyes suddenly emitted a strange light, staring fixedly at him without wavering. Her jade-like face underwent a series of emotional shifts, first disbelief, then ecstasy, and finally a sense of bewilderment. This stunning woman's strange expression made it clear to anyone that she and Han Li knew each other, and their relationship seemed quite close. The old man with the wooden crown's face immediately darkened. The hall fell silent. Most people looked at the woman and Han Li with extremely strange expressions. Hu Qinglei's voice wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable pressure as he asked Zi Ling if she knew Han Li. His words struck Zi Ling like thunder, making her heart tremble. Zi Ling's hazy eyes suddenly cleared. She quickly averted her gaze from Han Li, forcing a smile, admitting that she and Han Li were indeed old acquaintances. However, her rapidly heaving chest betrayed her turbulent emotions. Han Li touched his nose, remained silent for a moment, then let out a bitter laugh, admitting he hadn't expected to meet him here again. However, he was no ordinary man. The change in his expression only flashed briefly before returning to normal. Hu Qinglei remained silent for a moment, then casually suggested that since they were old acquaintances, they should drink a farewell cup, instructing Zi Ling to step forward and offer the drink. His words carried an unyielding air, as if Zi Ling's entry into the palace meant a complete break with her past. These words instantly froze the smile on Zi Ling's face. A maidservant promptly presented wine vessels. Zi Ling lowered her head, gazing at the wine vessels on the tray, her cloud-like hair obscuring her expression. After standing still for a moment, she finally extended her slender wrist and slowly picked up the wine pot. Seeing her compliance, the tense atmosphere in the hall eased slightly, and Hu Qinglei's gloomy expression softened a bit. Han Li watched as Zi Ling filled the cup with the rouge-colored wine, watching her gracefully approach with her slender fingers holding the cup. At this moment, her face showed no sign of abnormality, reverting to her previous cold indifference, her gaze towards Han Li as distant as that of a stranger. Han Li's lips twitched almost imperceptibly, then returned to calm. Zi Ling's voice seemed to drift from afar, woodenly urging Han Li to drink the cup of wine. The hollow tone of his voice stirred a pang of pity in many present. Han Li didn't immediately accept the cup. His gaze slowly moved upwards from the glass, sweeping over the woman's slender arms and jade-like body, finally settling on her exquisite yet lifeless face. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the atmosphere, which had just eased, instantly became heavy again. Hu Qinglei's face remained expressionless, but a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Song Jili sensed something was amiss, his brows furrowing slightly. Old monster Feng chuckled inscrutable. Most of the other nascent soul cultivators wore expressions of schadenfreude. Han Li suddenly raised his hand, took the cup, and drank it all in one gulp. This unexpected action startled everyone. Hu Qinglei raised an eyebrow, then quickly regained his composure. A complex expression appeared on Zi Ling's wooden face. She stared at Han Li for a moment, then silently took the empty cup and prepared to leave. Wait! Just when everyone thought the storm had passed, Han Li calmly spoke. If I'm not mistaken, it seems Miss Zi Ling has been placed under a restriction. Zi Ling's delicate body trembled violently, and she actually stopped in her tracks. The entire hall fell silent instantly. Hu Qinglei expressionlessly finished his drink, then asked Han Li with a warning tone if he had spoken inappropriately while drunk. Han Li smiled calmly, claiming he was perfectly sober. Hu Qinglei then questioned Zi Ling, suggesting that Han Li might be out of his mind. Zi Ling's lips trembled slightly, but she ultimately remained silent. When Hu Qinglei looked up again, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. A faint black aura appeared on his face, and his eyes had turned dark red, flashing with an inhuman cold light. Song Jili was about to speak to mediate when he was coldly interrupted by Hu Qinglei. This heavenly demon sect master made it clear that even if Han Li was brought by Song Jili, he wouldn't leave the demon palace without an explanation today. Song Jili could only smile wryly and remind Han Li that this matter was beyond his control, and Han Li should consider how to explain himself. Han Li understood and turned to Zi Ling, gently asking if she was willing since she was under a restraint. He frankly admitted that although he didn't want to offend Hu Qinglei, he couldn't stand by and watch his friend suffer and hoped Zi Ling would tell him the truth about whether she was willing to become his concubine. Zi Ling's face immediately showed a complex mix of joy, hesitation, and helplessness, and she was at a loss for words. Hu Qinglei interrupted with a cold laugh, stating bluntly that concubines in the demon palace were never chosen by their own will, and mocking Han Li, asking if he intended to forcibly take her away. Han Li sighed softly and still asked Zi Ling to confirm the truth. Zi Ling gazed at the composed Han Li, seeing that he had reached the late nascent soul stage yet was still willing to stand up for her, and her heart suddenly warmed. Finally, she gritted her teeth and told the truth. She had been forcibly taken to the mountain by an elder of the heavenly demon sect several years ago because of her appearance. How could it be considered voluntary? Upon hearing this, Hu Qinglei merely responded with a cold laugh. The other cultivators in the hall were also unfazed, showing no surprise. Such acts of abducting a female cultivator would be condemned by all if committed by righteous sects like the Tai sect, but in the eyes of demonic cultivators and unorthodox practitioners, it was commonplace, as if it were perfectly natural. The cultivators gathered in the demon palace at this moment, naturally, had no connection with the righteous path and were therefore unsurprised by such behavior. Han Li nodded slightly after hearing Zi Ling's statement, then turned to the gloomy-faced Hu Qinglei, calmly stating that he had no intention of being his enemy and proposed exchanging something of equal value for Zi Ling's freedom. He remained composed, seemingly unconcerned about the other's menacing expression. Hu Qinglei was initially taken aback, then a strange look appeared on his face. He retorted sarcastically, asking Han Li what right he had to discuss an exchange. He bluntly stated that even if Han Li's strength surpassed that of ordinary late-stage nascent soul cultivators, he was still insignificant in his eyes, and questioned what treasures in the world could possibly catch his eye. At this point, dark light surged around him, his killing intent fully revealed, a sinister implication that if Han Li's life were taken, the two spiritual treasures on his body would naturally be his. Han Li's eyes flickered slightly, and he quietly mentioned the incomplete data regarding the immortal slaying pearl and the spatial node via telepathy, asking if the other party was confident he could capture him alive for soul-searching under the threat of the immortal slaying pearl. Upon hearing this, Hu Qinglei's expression changed drastically, his gaze fixed on Han Li like an ice blade, and he fell silent abruptly. Unbeknownst to anyone, Old Demon Hu had secretly telepathically inquired about the immortal slaying pearl from Old Monster Feng. Although Old Monster Feng harbored resentment towards Han Li, he still truthfully told him, pointing out that Han Li possessed more than one immortal slaying pearl, and advising him to be cautious. Old Demon Hu remained outwardly calm, but inwardly he felt a chill. He then switched his attention to Song Jili, testing whether the other party was aware of the incomplete spatial node data. Song Jili calmly responded, implying that this was to be expected, the key being Han Li's willingness to cooperate. He explicitly demanded that Hu Laomo not harm Han Li's life, but tacitly permitted him to punish him slightly to quell his anger. Although Hu Laomo was unwilling, he ultimately restrained his killing intent after weighing the options. He coldly looked at Han Li, his words carrying a hidden threat, indicating his willingness to give him a way out as long as he retracted his previous words, he would forgive and forget. Upon hearing this, the blue-robed scholar and the nascent soul cultivators, including the bitter bamboo elder, in the hall were all taken aback. They could naturally tell that this supreme elder of the heavenly demon sect seemed to genuinely fear Han Li, otherwise he would never have uttered such words when he was clearly extremely enraged. Astonished gazes all fell upon Han Li. All the cultivators wanted to see what abilities this man possessed that could force the old man in the wooden crown to change his mind. "Thank you for your kind offer, fellow Daoist. Unfortunately, I don't have the habit of readily retracting my words. Fellow Daoist, please reconsider my previous statement," Han Li replied without hesitation. This time, the old man with the wooden crown was truly enraged. His face turned ashen, and he uttered 3 consecutive "good less." His lightning-fast gaze swept over Zi Ling and Han Li, and an astonishing aura erupted from him. He instantly transformed into a massive vortex, drawing all the spiritual energy in the hall towards him. This caused all the cultivators who sensed the unfathomable spiritual pressure emanating from the old demon to shudder, and a single thought flashed through their minds. This old demon seems truly angered by Han Li. It looks like he's about to make his move. Thinking this, the 2 cultivators closest to Han Li exchanged a glance and silently stood up, taking a few steps back to avoid being caught in the crossfire. Although Zi Ling had already formed her nascent soul, she still struggled to withstand the spiritual pressure of a nascent soul cultivator. Her face paled, and her delicate body trembled slightly as she took 2 steps back, landing precisely in front of Han Li's desk. At that moment, a warm hand gently pressed onto her shoulder, and pure magical power surged into her meridians. Zi Ling felt a warmth spread through her body. The piercing pressure transformed into a gentle spring breeze. She turned to look and saw Han Li's palm still lightly stroking her shoulder, smiling calmly at her. Though she didn't understand why Han Li was so composed, his smile inexplicably calmed Zi Ling's anxious heart. She lightly bit her lip, a faint blush rising on her cheeks, and returned a gentle smile. Seeing this, the old demon Hu was furious but laughed inwardly. After withdrawing his oppressive aura, he proposed 2 heaven-reaching spiritual treasures as an exchange. The cultivators present exchanged knowing glances. This was clearly a blatant attempt to provoke her without any real sincerity. The heavenly treasures are incredibly precious. Their appearance alone triggers bloodshed. Even obtaining a replica is a rare feat for ordinary cultivators. The old demon's demand for 2 genuine pieces speaks volumes. Upon hearing this, Zi Ling's jade-like face drained of color. She knew the value of these treasures and understood this was an impossible condition. Han Li sighed softly, politely declining the request. The old demon then coldly offered the immortal slaying pearl in exchange, but Han Li still shook his head, stating that even if he were willing to exchange, he feared the consequences of losing his protective amulet. The old demon scoffed, saying he didn't believe Han Li could offer anything else that would tempt him besides these 2 treasures. Han Li suddenly chuckled and asked the old demon how long he had left to live. Although surprised, the old demon still claimed he had 300 or 400 years to live. At this moment, a mysterious glint flashed across Han Li's face, and he once again transmitted his voice telepathically. When old demon Hu heard the suggestion of extending lifespan by 400 or 500 years, he abruptly sat up, inexplicably asking if it was the rejuvenating water. This sudden reaction drew the attention of old Monster Feng, and even Zhongzhili, who had been meditating with his eyes closed, opened his eyes and looked at the bewildered old demon Hu thoughtfully. Realizing his lapse in composure, old demon Hu immediately composed himself and urgently transmitted a message to Han Li, indicating that if such a holy medicine truly existed, he was not only willing to release the person but would also offer additional benefits. Han Li calmly responded, frankly stating that he did not possess the finished rejuvenating water, but only a portion of its main refining ingredient, cold marrow. Old demon Hu could not hide his disappointment upon hearing this. Han Li then calmly analyzed that if the finished medicine truly existed, they could simply ask Zhongzhili and others for help to forcibly rescue the person. There was no need to come here to exchange it. He pointed out that with the strength of the heavenly demon sect, as long as they found the solar essence fire, they had a good chance of refining the rejuvenating water using the cold marrow. Exchanging this for Zi Ling's freedom would be fair to both sides. For these nascent soul cultivators, elixirs that could prolong their lives were far more desirable than a few spiritual treasures. Han Li didn't believe old demon Hu would be unmoved. If he didn't possess this item, taking Zi Ling away from the demon palace would have been a real headache. Of course, he dared to bring it out only because the other party already showed some fear of him. Otherwise, he didn't want to provoke a nascent soul cultivator into attacking him. The transmission on the other end fell silent. Old demon Hu's eyes flickered, and he looked thoughtful. Old Monster Feng and Zhongzhili exchanged glances, both seeing surprise in each other's eyes. Neither of them knew what old demon Hu and Han Li had discussed that had caused the previously aggressive old demon Hu to suddenly lose all his anger. The other nascent soul cultivators were equally curious, but none of them dared to ask. Hu Laomo, his voice dark and menacing, questioned Han Li, mentioning that the cold marrow was unique to the lesser extreme palace, and that he had personally searched for it but found nothing, suspecting that the item in Han Li's possession was the bottle that had disappeared years ago. Han Li had anticipated this, and calmly explained that it wasn't from the same source, but rather that he had refined it again from 10,000-year-old Xian Jade in the Xian Jade cave of the Lesser Extreme Palace's Void Spirit Hall. He also explained that he wouldn't give away everything in this exchange, only enough to refine about 2 portions of rejuvenating yang water. Hu Laomo snorted coldly, indicating that he didn't care about the origin of the cold marrow, only that it was enough for his own use. However, he immediately stopped communicating telepathically and directly stated another condition. Besides the cold marrow, Han Li must also withstand one of his attacks without dodging or using the immortal slaying pearl. Regardless of the outcome, he would release Zi Ling from demon to or mountain. Han Li was slightly surprised, not expecting such an additional request. Zhongzhili's expression flickered upon hearing this condition, but he instantly regained his composure. Old Monster Feng glanced at old demon with surprise. The others had varying expressions. Originally, old demon's drastic change in expression had already left them bewildered, wondering what rare treasure Han Li had produced that could cause even a nascent soul cultivator to change so drastically. But now, upon hearing the condition, they were speechless. Take your attack head-on, and you can't even dodge. Han Li's pupils contracted, and he murmured repeatedly, confirming the question. That's right, that's the condition. If I don't teach you a lesson, others might really think that I, the dignified lord of the demon palace, can't even protect my concubine. Old demon said sinisterly. For a moment, the hall fell silent again. Many secretly wondered if old demon still harbored murderous intent and intended to use this opportunity to kill his opponent. After all, given the astonishing difference in strength between a nascent soul cultivator and a nascent soul cultivator, how could one safely withstand an attack without dodging? As everyone's gaze turned to Han Li, Zi Ling's face paled to almost translucent white. After a moment of silence, she suddenly gritted her teeth. No need for Brother Han to exchange anything. I've changed my mind. I don't intend to leave the demon palace. Brother Han, you can go on your own, she said with difficulty, her voice tinged with bitterness. Han Li was taken aback upon hearing this, but then understood her meaning and chuckled. However, before he could speak, the old demon coldly said, "What do you take my demon palace for? Do you think you can just come and go as you please? If I agree to this deal, then your intention to stay here is wishful thinking. Young man Han, you won't agree to this, will you?" "I certainly won't agree. If it's just one strike, I'd really like to try and take it." Han Li shook his head at Zi Ling, agreeing without a care in the world. The old demon chuckled, raised one hand, and pointed a finger at Zi Ling not far away. The woman immediately felt a tingling, itchy sensation in her dantian and couldn't help but gasp softly, her face paling. Her body trembled, and several black threads shot out from her body, coiling like serpents before disappearing into the old demon's fingers. Zi Ling straightened up again. After a slight flow of her internal energy, her face showed a mixture of surprise and joy. The spiritual energy she had previously been unable to mobilize surged forth once more. Han Li, seeing this, swept his divine sense over Zi Ling's body. After a moment, a look of satisfaction finally appeared on his face. The restriction within the woman's body was indeed gone. "Where's the thing?" The old demon was quite blunt. Having just removed the restriction from Zi Ling's body, he coldly questioned Han Li. Han Li's lips curled into a smile. Suddenly, he raised his hand, and a beam of white light shot out from his sleeve. The old demon's eyes lit up. With a single grab, the white light appeared in his hand. It was a milky white jade bottle. The old demon's eyes flashed twice, and with a flick of his sleeve, the bottle cap opened on its own. Simultaneously, rings of black light rippled outwards, forming a black protective shield to prevent anyone from using divine sense to peek inside. The old man with the wooden crown's cautious attitude aroused even more curiosity among the others. Even Xiong Jili stroked his beard, lost in thought. After only a short while, the old demon finished examining the bottle's contents, a smile appearing on his face. He recapped the bottle, and with a flick of his wrist, it vanished without a trace. Having done all this, he looked up at Han Li again, his smile fading, replaced by a chilling aura. Suddenly, a flash of black light enveloped him, and he transformed into a streak of black light, shooting out of the hall, leaving behind only his emotionless voice. "Young Han, I'll be waiting for you outside the hall. Don't keep me waiting too long." Before he finished speaking, the dark light vanished at the hall's entrance, its lingering echo still reverberating within. Han Li, seeing this, showed no sign of panic. Instead, he leisurely poured himself another cup of spiritual wine, drank it down in a few gulps, and then calmly stood up. "Brother Han, are you really going to take his attack head-on? He's a nascent soul cultivator." Zi Ling asked, her brows furrowed with worry. "Don't worry, if it's just one attack, I'm quite confident," Han Li said with a calm smile, glancing at the woman. Back when he hadn't advanced to the late nascent soul stage, he had even withstood an attack from a split soul of the ancient demon ancestor. Facing a nascent soul cultivator, he was confident. "Then I'll go out with Brother Han, and I'll watch the battle from the sidelines," Zi Ling said resolutely, her eyes shining brightly. Han Li hesitated for a moment, then nodded after meeting the strange light in her eyes. A flash of spiritual light emanated from him, and he grabbed Zi Ling, transforming into a streak of azure light and disappearing without a trace at the palace gate. The blue-robed scholars and others in the hall also activated their escape lights and scattered out of the hall. They naturally wouldn't let this spectacle slip by easily. Even the other two beautiful female cultivators who, like Zi Ling, were to become concubines, hesitated for a moment before leaving with their palace maids. In an instant, only Song Jili and Old Monster Fong remained in the hall. They sat silently in place, not moving an inch. "Brother Song, what do you think?" Old Monster Fong asked. "What do you mean? How do you see it?" Song Jili asked calmly. "Naturally, it's what that Han brat used to make old demon Hu forget even about his concubine being taken away. There aren't many things in this world that can move old demon Hu's heart," Old Monster Fong sneered. "Since they're few, they're not non-existent." "What's so strange about that?" Song Jili remained unusually calm. "Brother Song, do you really want to know what that thing is? A treasure that can make old demon Hu lose his composure like this must be very useful to both of us," Old Monster Fong said, giving Song Jili a deep look, his words carrying a profound meaning. "Even if that thing is a treasure that can help us break through our current bottleneck, or a sacred medicine that can extend our lives by 100 or 200 years, so what? Fellow Daoist Fong, do you think that breaking through your current realm will allow you to ascend to the spirit realm, or that living an extra 100 or 200 years will allow you to cultivate to the late nascent soul stage in one go? If you can't do that, we shouldn't be distracted by external things, we should focus on finding a spatial node. As long as we can find a suitable node, we can have hope of immortality. Why go through the trouble of seeking something far away?" Song Jili sighed and said these words. "Indeed, Brother Song is right. It was I who was greedy for a moment. Actually, no matter what that thing is, we're definitely doomed once it falls into old demon Hu's hands. And judging from old demon Hu's appearance, he doesn't want to tell anyone at all. However, this old demon actually wanted Han to take his attack head-on. He has ulterior motives. Could he really be planning to take that kid's life on this opportunity?" Old Monster Fong pondered for a while, then smiled bitterly. "Nothing will happen. I already warned fellow Daoist Hu beforehand. Besides, since junior brother Han dared to agree so readily, he must have some confidence. But then again, this old demon has a strange temperament. Just in case, let's go out and check. What if he does something unexpected in a moment of confusion?" Song Jili then remembered something, his brow furrowing, and he became somewhat restless. Old Monster Fong nodded and stood up as well. The two of them vanished from their spot in a flash. The next moment, their figures appeared near the hall entrance, then disappeared again in a flash. When Song Jili and Old Monster Fong reappeared on the ground outside the hall, Han Li and the old man with the wooden crown were already hovering in mid-air, facing each other, about 100 feet away. One looked calm, the other expressionless. Scattered on the ground were other cultivators, but from several other nearby palaces, hundreds of brightly dressed demon palace maids emerged, whispering amongst themselves as they watched the scene unfold in the air, their faces filled with excitement. This was understandable, even they rarely saw an opportunity for the demon palace master to personally intervene. "If old demon Hu goes all out, Brother Song, do you think Han Boy can withstand this attack?" Old Monster Fong squinted at the sky for a moment, then suddenly turned his head and asked with a strange expression. "That depends on how fellow Daoist Hu plans. If it's just an ordinary attack, then taking it is naturally no problem. But if he's willing to sacrifice his lifespan or even intend to use his spiritual treasure, then junior brother Han might not be safe. But fellow Daoist Hu shouldn't do something that results in mutual destruction," Song Jili said slowly, his brow furrowed. "Brother Song is right. But Brother Song may not know, but old demon Hu recently acquired a rare treasure. I've heard its power is comparable to a spiritual treasure, but it only requires a special secret refinement beforehand to be easily used. If old demon Hu combines it with his own magic power, its power will be unimaginable. I think he'll most likely use it." Old Monster Fong chuckled. "Is that so?" Song Jili's expression changed slightly, showing some emotion. Just as Song Jili and the other man were whispering, the two facing off in the air finally made their move. The old man with the wooden crown flicked his sleeve, and a ball of emerald light shot out, swirling before transforming into something that stopped in front of him. It was an ancient scroll, shimmering with an eerie emerald glow, giving off an extremely mysterious aura. Old demon Hu coldly glanced at Han Li opposite him, then suddenly formed hand seals and began chanting incantations. The scroll slowly unfurled amidst chanting. A shimmering emerald light danced across its surface, revealing a dozen or so verdant hills of varying sizes, a beautiful landscape painting. But before anyone could clearly see the scroll's contents, a green mist erupted from it, instantly engulfing the entire scroll. From within the mist came a mournful cry, and 18 beams of emerald light shot into the sky. An unbelievable scene unfolded. High in the sky, the beams of light dimmed, revealing miniature hills, each about 10 feet tall, vibrant green, and brimming with spiritual energy. The mournful cry emanated from these hills. "This is..." Upon witnessing this extraordinary phenomenon, Han Li was startled. His previously languid expression turned serious, and without hesitation, he flipped his hands over. Instantly, the two treasures he had been holding, a green wooden ruler and a small cyan cauldron, appeared in his hands. He tossed the ruler forward, and a lotus shadow flashed, then rapidly expanded, transforming into a giant silver lotus that blocked his path. The ruler, shimmering with dazzling green light, slowly rotated at the lotus's heart. Almost simultaneously, Han Li flicked the cyan cauldron. A clear ringing sound rang out, and the lid flew open, releasing a wisp of fine cyan silk. Under the spreading cyan light, it transformed into a net over 10 jong wide, descending from the sky and protecting Han Li within it. The void heaven cauldron itself shrank to a few feet in size and flew overhead. Then, Han Li made another hand seal, and a golden light flashed around him, forming a layer of shimmering golden light that clung tightly to his clothes. The Vajra shield formed from the Buddhist relic. Having erected 3 layers of his strongest defense in one go, Han Li felt a sense of relief. The old demon opposite him, seeing all this, calmly said, "Since you're prepared, I'll make my move." With these words, the old demon let out a low shout, his hands forming a hand seal, and a jet of black light shot from his mouth, disappearing instantly into the green mist. The old demon was actually pouring his spiritual power into the mist within the scroll. With a muffled boom, the green mist churned violently, and 18 more black light beams shot into the sky, each one injecting into 18 miniature mountains high above. These small hills instantly shone with a dazzling emerald light, rapidly growing larger and larger. Within moments, they transformed into colossal peaks 50 or 60 feet tall, becoming 18 real mountain peaks. The cries from within grew clearer, and small apes, each about a foot in size, appeared and disappeared among the mountains, their secrets unknown. Seeing this, the cultivators below gasped in amazement, and Zi Ling couldn't help but feel a growing unease. The old demon's face flashed with black energy, and with a single grab of his hand, weighing over 1,000 pounds, a small hill trembled and flew towards the opposite side. After the old demon solemnly and slowly made several more grabs, 7 or 8 small hills roared and crashed in a row towards Han Li's location. Such colossal beings, let alone 7 or 8, even a single one would be impossible for an ordinary nascent soul cultivator to withstand. Although about 10 peaks remained, the old demon exhaled a long breath, his eyes dimmed, and his movement ceased. Whether the old demon was genuinely wary, believing these mountains were enough to teach Han Li a lesson, or simply didn't want to expend too much of his magical power by directly grabbing them, Han Li was momentarily stunned. Even though he knew the conditions for the attack meant it wouldn't be ordinary, he hadn't expected the old demon to simply hurl several small mountains at him. Regardless of any magical properties these mountains might possess, the sheer force of the impact would be devastating, even with his protective magical treasures. Moreover, without the previous agreement, he could easily have used his escape technique to dodge, but now he had no choice but to stand still. Han Li felt a bitter taste in his mouth, but his mind raced, and he suddenly slapped his waist with one hand. Instantly, a streak of black light shot out, circling once before revealing a small, black monkey, only a few inches in size. It was the soul-crying beast. With a flick of his sleeve on the other side, a small black bottle flew out. After the bottle inverted, 5 humanoid skeletons shot out with a burst of greyish-white demonic energy. The 5-hearted demon. Han Li swiftly formed hand seals, simultaneously urging his divine sense to activate the power. The little monkey's body surged with black light, its size rapidly increasing until it instantly transformed into a colossal ape over 30 jong tall. It slammed its massive fists into its chest, unleashing a thunderous roar that pierced the air. Then, with a fierce snort, a large plume of yellow light shot from its nostrils, coalescing into a gigantic, hazy yellow trident. The ape raised its hand and seized the weapon, as if a celestial demon had descended to earth. The other 5 skeletons simultaneously converged in the center, transforming into a gigantic skeleton amidst churning demonic energy, each wielding a massive, gleaming white bone blade. The 2 colossal creatures, a demon and a beast, positioned themselves on either side of Han Li. Almost simultaneously, the first small mountain crashed down with overwhelming force. Before Han Li could react, the skeleton and the giant ape attacked at the same time. One inhaled sharply, raising its giant trident to block the attack, while the other raised 2 bone blades and slashed fiercely upwards. With 2 deafening booms, the giant ape and the skeleton managed to avert the oncoming emerald peak. Han Li had just taken out his 3-colored feather fan, but his face showed no joy. Several more mountains were already crashing down. A third boom resounded, the giant ape's body trembled violently, the demonic markings on its back dimmed, its giant trident shattered inch by inch, and its form rapidly shrank within the black light. Deprived of support, the skeleton was overwhelmed, and with a fourth boom, its bone blades shattered, and 4 mountains crashed down. Just as Han Li was about to swing his fan to parry, the skeletons formed from the 5 demons suddenly unleashed 5 colored flames. Amidst the explosion of light, the descent of the lowest mountain peak slowed tenfold. The subsequent mountains, however, continued to press down, colliding with the former and creating a dazzling emerald light. The 5 colored flames surged and lifted each other, a magnificent sight. Han Li was still marveling at this unexpected power when, in the distance, the old demon Hu had already spurred 2 mountains into the emerald light. With an even more violent roar, the 5-colored light dissipated. Han Li quickly activated his magic, the skeletons transforming into white mist and escaping, while a 3-colored firebird shot out from his fan and crashed into the emerald light. The light's descent slowed slightly amidst the explosion, but then it pressed down again. He immediately pointed at the small cauldron above his head, and a hazy blue spiritual cloud rose into the sky, finally halting the emerald light. However, the last 2 mountains pressed down in succession, and the emerald light slowly fell again. Han Li took a deep breath, flicked his sleeve, and the silver lotus reappeared and swelled in a flash of Buddhist light. Without pausing, 2 golden arcs shot out from his sleeve, transforming into a giant golden python, and he spat out a crystal-clear bead, which transformed into a purple dragon. The silver lotus, the golden python, and the purple dragon all met the emerald light above. At this moment, the emerald light flashed with spiritual light, and the 8 mountain peaks merged into a 1,000-foot-tall mountain that pressed down. Various colored spiritual lights exploded and intertwined, causing the giant mountain to pause slightly, but unable to stop its momentum. As the silver lotus was forcibly crushed, Han Li's pupils flashed with blue light, and he spat out his essence blood, which entered the green ruler at the lotus's heart. Han Li's 10 fingers moved like wheels, forming one hand seal after another, while the profound and obscure incantation was uttered clearly. Upon hearing this incantation, Song Jili and Old Monster Feng, who had been calmly watching the battle below, exchanged glances, both showing surprise. Just as the 1,000-foot mountain was about to crush the giant lotus, 8 strange, piercing cries suddenly emanated from the green wooden ruler within the lotus. The ruler then spun rapidly, revealing 8 illusory figures, each about an inch in size. These figures, urged on by Han Li's incantation, grew exponentially, transforming in the blink of an eye into 8 10-foot-long phantoms of spirit beasts, their bodies shimmering with a hazy green light, almost appearing substantial. Each phantom looked exactly like several legendary spirit beasts of heaven and earth. The 8 phantoms, some spewing spiritual fire, others lunging forward, combined their strength to actually stop the mountain, forcing it to slowly rotate in mid-air, unable to fall an inch. The old demon in the distance, witnessing this, finally turned somewhat grim. Although he hadn't truly intended to kill Han Li this time, he definitely intended to severely injure him. If Han Li were to so easily block this attack, wouldn't the purpose of setting this condition be rendered useless? Thinking this to himself, old demon Hu, though seemingly unmoved, secretly urged his divine sense. Suddenly, a loud cry resounded from the emerald peak, and countless grey shadows shot out from the mountain, transforming into apes over 10 feet long, which ferociously pounced down. These apes were not truly demonic beasts, but rather transformed from the demonic souls used as blood sacrifices during the forging of this treasure. Because they were essentially immortal, even if cut into countless pieces, they could regenerate from the emerald peak in a short time. Their power was such that they grew stronger against stronger opponents and weaker against weaker ones, making them extremely difficult to deal with. However, the moment these apes appeared, the soul-crying beast, which had shrunk to about 10 feet in size beside Han Li, lit up its eyes, and without a word, also let out a long cry. Then, its body swelled up again in the black light. This time, however, its body only grew to a dozen or so jong, approximately 63 meters before ceasing its transformation, and it let out a snort. Streams of yellow light billowed from the giant ape's nostrils, transforming into hundreds of hazy yellow beams that shot towards the sky. Strangely enough, the apes, despite their dense demonic aura and astonishing cultivation levels, almost all possessing at least a level 5 demonic beast, and some even appearing to be at the peak of level 7, were instantly subdued by these yellow beams, falling to the ground like ants. In the blink of an eye, they turned into wisps of green mist, which were absorbed by the yellow beams and carried away at lightning speed. These green wisps were then inhaled by the giant ape transformed from the howling soul beast. None of the hundreds of apes escaped, becoming the howling soul beast's meal. However, after devouring all the apes, the ferocious beast shrank again, transforming into a streak of black light and flying into Han Li's waist, disappearing without a trace and returning to its spirit beast pouch. Han Li was taken aback, but then a message arrived in his divine sense that the howling soul beast was about to evolve again, and he was immediately overjoyed. However, the strange phenomenon of the howling soul beast devouring so many azure apes in one go surprised not only the other cultivators, but even old demon Hu himself was momentarily stunned. Others might not know the power of these azure apes, but as the treasure itself, he knew how troublesome these demonic souls were, and his astonishment far surpassed that of others. Meanwhile, the 1,000-foot-tall mountain in the air, under the combined force of the 8 phantom spirit beasts, came to a complete stop in its tracks, seemingly unable to fall any further. Han Li stared at the mountain in the air, his face slightly pale, secretly considering whether to use other treasures to completely destroy it. Ha ha, junior brother Han and fellow Daoist who are indeed incredibly powerful. How about we end this exchange here? Any further, and it might really damage our relationship. Song Jili below suddenly laughed and spoke up. He vanished silently from his spot in a flash. The next moment, he suddenly appeared between Han Li and old demon Hu, casually grabbing at the 1,000-foot-tall green mountain with one hand. With a thunderous boom, a black, ghostly claw wreathed in mist suddenly appeared from the void, like a colossal object descending from the sky, grabbing the mountain peak and lifting it more than 10 feet higher with a single forceful movement of its 5 fingers. Han Li's expression subtly changed upon seeing Song Jili's supernatural power, while old demon Hu's face darkened. HMPH, I didn't expect fellow Daoist Song's giant spirit claw to have reached such a level. But is he displaying it now to show off to me? Old demon Hu said coldly, observing the scene with a sinister air. The giant spirit claw is nothing but a trivial skill, how could it possibly meet brother Hu's approval? I was merely afraid that you might get carried away and forget our agreement. Now, junior brother Han, you should consider yourself to have accepted this attack, right? Song Jili said with a slight smile, seemingly unconcerned. As the lord of the demon palace, how could I break my word to a nascent soul cultivator? Fellow Daoist Han has indeed accepted my attack. Old demon Hu's expression remained uncertain for a while before he slowly nodded at Song Jili. He then raised his hand and gestured towards a distant mountain. Instantly, a booming sound emanated from the mountain, its entire body flashing with emerald light. Song Jili's lips twitched, and the colossal claw that had gripped the mountain's summit vanished into thin air. Then, the 1,000-foot mountain trembled, transforming back into 800-foot peaks, before hurtling back, its size rapidly shrinking. As the 8 mountain peaks flew to within inches of the scroll, they shrank to mere inches in size and vanished into the painting. The same scene unfolded above the dozen or so verdant peaks hovering above the old demon's head. In the blink of an eye, all the small mountains disappeared into the painting, which then slowly closed amidst a flash of spiritual light, transforming back into an ordinary, ancient scroll. The old demon made a grabbing motion in the air, and the scroll transformed into a ball of green light, disappearing into his sleeve. Although I will not marry Zi Ling now, the other 2 women are still here. The concubine taking ceremony will still be held in 3 days. Brother Song, are you not going to take your leave now? Won't you have a drink to celebrate? The old man with the wooden crown glanced at Han Li and Song Jili, then smiled, as if his previous cold words to Song Jili had never happened. Of course, I've already presented my congratulatory gift, how could I not have a few more drinks? Song Jili smiled broadly, showing no surprise whatsoever. Fellow Daoist Han, why don't you stay a few more days in this palace, until after the ceremony, before you leave? Old demon Hu nodded, then said the same thing to Han Li with a calm expression. Han Li's eyes flashed, but his mind raced, and he replied without showing any change in expression, of course. Senior brother Song and fellow Daoist Feng Haven T left, how could I leave? Ha ha, good. Fellow Daoists, let us go back to the palace and have a few more drinks. Old demon Hu raised his head and laughed loudly, then transformed into a streak of black light and shot towards the palace below. The cultivators below, who had been shaken and amazed by the supernatural powers displayed by Han Li and old demon Hu in their battle, naturally agreed with old demon Hu's words and followed him inside. After chuckling, old monster Feng returned to the main hall, leaving only a delighted Zi Ling below. Junior brother Han, let's go in too. Hee, junior brother, don't worry. Fellow Daoist Hu is a man of principle. Since you withstood his attack, this matter is over. He won't find another excuse to cause you trouble. You and this girl can stay in the demon palace for a few more days and enjoy yourselves. Song Jili said these words to Han Li with a grin, then floated down and swaggered into the hall. Han Li smiled wryly, shook his head, and slowly landed as well. Brother Han, are you all right? Zi Ling couldn't help but approach, her exquisitely beautiful face filled with a mixture of worry and gratitude. I'm fine, just a little exhausted. But Miss Zi Ling, are you planning to leave now, or after old Demon Hu's concubine taking ceremony? Han Li asked calmly, looking at her. Brother Han, when do you plan to leave? I'll go with you, Zi Ling replied almost without hesitation. If that's the case, you'll have to stay here for a while longer. I'm afraid I can't leave immediately, Han Li said after a moment of silence, then sighed softly. Leaving now is indeed inappropriate. It might completely offend those nascent soul cultivators like Hu Laomo. I think they seem genuinely wary of Brother Han, so I imagine Hu Laomo won't go back on his word if I stay here. Zi Ling hesitated slightly, then slowly nodded. Having regained her freedom, her alertness and intelligence returned, transforming her once again into the ethereal Zi Ling who dared to travel the world alone. Seeing her radiant appearance, Han Li smiled and immediately headed towards the main hall.